Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with your video on This Week in NYRA Bets, where I cover some promotions and upcoming content, but also discuss some of the biggest stories in horse racing that we've seen over the last week and what we plan to see over the coming week. Well, listen, make sure to press that like button on this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. We're done with Saratoga, but the content is just heating up. This week alone, we're going to be covering Belmont at Aqueduct, Churchill Downs, and Woodbine. So if you are a fan of horse racing, you want to press that subscribe button and get the best insight in the industry right here on NYRA Bets YouTube. Listen, let's talk a little bit about an exciting week of racing coming up. We got some things ending, like Kentucky Downs. We saw Del Mar and Colonial finish up. Obviously, Saratoga 2 weeks ago. But with the new endings, there's also new beginnings. And we see Churchill kicking off, Belmont at the Big A. It's going to be a lot of fun tracks kicking off and starting up their meets. And before you know it, a couple months, we got the Breeders' Cup, obviously. And then right after that, we got the championship meet at Gulfstream Park. And oh, by the way, in between, a little thing called Keeneland Fall, which is always a lot of fun. But listen, let's talk a little bit about the weekly promotions we have coming up this week, kicking off on Wednesday. If you're playing both Horseshoe Indianapolis and Delaware Park, we got a promotion for you. Bet $50 at each track. You get a $10 bonus back on NYRA Bets, win or lose. You can't beat that. And Horseshoe Indy, I should say, if you're watching this on Tuesday, get in the game. They got a pick 4 and a pick 5 carryover. So we'll have to see if we get a double carryover potentially in any of those pools. That'd be something to see. I do think the late sequence on Tuesday looks a little bit chalky, so not super optimistic about a double carryover, but you never know. That would obviously be a lot of fun. But like I said, $10 bonus if you bet 50 at Horseshoe Indy and Delaware Park on Wednesday. On Thursday, we got night racing under the Twin Spires at Churchill Downs, and you want to play right here on NYRA Bets, especially the first race, because we did a $5,000 hit and split in the race 1 trifecta at Churchill on Thursday. So if you played our other hit and split promotions, you know how this works. We put $5,000 into that trifecta pool essentially, and anyone who opts in on NYRA Bets and hits the trifecta in race 1 gets to split an additional $5,000 with the others who have opted in and hit it. So this is a great way of potentially turning what could be, I got to take a closer look at that race on Thursday, a chalky race 1 result and adding a whole lot of money to your pocket if you're playing on NYRA Bets. So definitely a great promotion to check out. Like I said, that hit and split trifecta in the first race to kick things off at Churchill Downs. Now let's talk about Friday, September 13th. Friday the 13th is not a bad day. It's not a bad omen because we got a great promotion, $10,000 hit and split to kick things off starting opening day of the fall meet, Belmont at the Big A. Going to be a lot of fun. $10,000 hit and split on the late pick 5. And again, you opt in. If you hit that late pick 5, you get to split an additional $10,000 with anyone else who hit that late pick 5. Sometimes there's only one person who opts in and hits it, and they can add $10,000 to their winning ticket. Sometimes it's maybe 3 or 4 people. Still, that's an extra potentially $2,500 to add to your winning ticket. So listen, you want to opt in, you want to play on NYRA Bets. On Saturday, September 14th, we got a few different promotions, but we also kick off our Breeders' Cup Bankroll Builder. Always a lot of fun. If you opt in to the Breeders' Cup Bankroll Builder race, which is the Woodbine Mile this week, you bet $50 to win on a horse in the Woodbine Mile. You get $20 back, win or lose. You can't beat that promotion. We're going to have it for the next 5 subsequent weeks. And if you opt in every week, by the end of it, you will have accumulated $100 worth of credit, which we will put into your NYRA Bets account for the Breeders' Cup. And listen, that's just if you lost. If you win any of those races, man, you're up big. So, like I said, great way to opt in. You get $100 by opting in all 5 of those weeks. You get $20 each week. And listen, if you just want to opt in on a couple of those, maybe you get 20, 40, 60 bucks added. Hey, a little extra for the Breeders' Cup, never a bad thing. And then on Sunday, we have 10 times reward points if you're betting at Cura. Now, let's talk about some of the upcoming content that we have this week. And as I mentioned, a lot of big racing, Woodbine, EP Taylor, Natalma, the Summer Stakes, a lot of big races. I'm going to be joined by Woodbine analyst Jeff Bratt. He and I are going to sit down, talk about some of those big races taking place at Woodbine this Saturday. We're going to cover all 4 of the Grade 1 races. Going to be a lot of fun having that conversation with Brett. Look for that to come out on Thursday. Also going to do a capping the card and going to switch it up because we're done with Saratoga, so I don't just have to focus on New York. And we're going to go down to Churchill Downs because we are kicking off the road to the 2025 Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks with the Iroquois and the Pocahontas, which are the first Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks prep races for next year. So it's a really fun card on Saturday. So I'm going to be doing that, capping the card at Churchill Downs. And then I have my good friend Sarah El Badwi joining me to preview Saturday's Jockey Club Oaks taking place at Belmont at the Big A. And then some other stuff coming up live next week. We got Pennsylvania Derby. I'll be on site at Parks. Make sure to come up, say hi. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we should have a really great time. A lot of great content around that. And then we're going to have some Breeders' Cup videos starting to drop as soon as next week, and really focused on trying to help get you prepared for the Breeders' Cup, what you should be watching, what you should be paying attention to, some interesting stats, some analysis of the different European trainers and horses that are coming over, the Japanese horses and trainers that are coming over, as well as obviously those horses that have qualified through the Win and You're In races. So, like I said, a lot of great Breeders' Cup stuff coming up. Well, listen, we had a lot of great races take place over the last week, and we saw Cogburn, I feel like we got to probably start there, put on quite a display at Kentucky Downs and avenged his only loss on the turf. His only time he had lost on the turf was at Kentucky Downs last year. And I've talked about it before. Kentucky Downs is an unusual track, European style track. You have kind of a tight hairpin turn on one end. You have kind of a big looping turn on the other, a lot of undulation on the ground. Not every horse takes to it. Not every horse likes it. And some horses love it. And it's perfectly natural, I think, for those of us who handicap, if we see a horse ran poorly at Kentucky Downs, willing to draw a line through that and go, well, the horse just didn't like it. That's okay. Look at all the other performances this horse has had. And Cogburn was kind of like that, where I said, the horse maybe just didn't like Kentucky Downs very much. Well, son of a gun, if he comes back and runs a 106 Beyer speed figure and wins at Kentucky Downs, incredibly impressive effort. I listen, he's the top turf sprinter. There's really not a close second. But, and there's always a but, there is some negative history in this space when you think about the Breeders' Cup. And that is the fact that over the last 9 years, Breeders' Cups hosted in California, horses that previously ran at Kentucky Downs are 0 for 53 in the Breeders' Cup races in California. So if you prepped at Kentucky Downs and you go to the California Breeders' Cup, 0 for 53, dating back to 2015. Now listen, Mark Twain once said there are 3 types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. So listen, statistics, they can make you say anything you want. Now, a lot of people will say, well, but a lot of these Kentucky Downs horses, they end up going to run in the Keeneland Fall Meet. You're absolutely right. They do. The interesting part is their luck in the Breeders' Cup does not really improve at all. You maybe get 1 or 2 horses that end up winning. Percentages are still incredibly low, even for horses that ran in the Kentucky Downs 2 back, who then go to the Breeders' Cup. So, it's a track that can produce some anomalous results in that there are horses that really do just love that track, and they might not take to Santa Anita or Del Mar quite the same way. And that's perfectly understandable. And so it's interesting to see Cogburn, obviously such a classy horse, has just incredibly dominant everywhere he's run on the turf. So it's hard to imagine that he's not going to run well out at Del Mar this November, but something to keep in mind. Couple of other things I want to point out. Big congrats to Neecie Marie for getting that big stakes win at Kentucky Downs over the weekend. Always really liked this horse for trainer Butch Reed. always love those horses coming out of parks. That's just the old Pennsylvania native in me, perhaps saying that, but really cool to see her get that win there. You go down to Colonial and their final big last day for the Virginia Derby, which, by the way, won't be on the turf anymore. The Virginia Derby will now be a 50-point Derby prep taking place in March, and that'll obviously be run on the dirt. Now, there will still be the equivalent of the Virginia Derby, but it'll be named something else next year. So they're still keeping the race over that Labor Day weekend, but it's just going to be, or not, sometimes it's Labor Day, sometimes the week after Labor Day. It's going to be reconstituted as a different name. But nevertheless, we saw Deterministic get the win there over Grand Mo the First. I was back in the Grand Mo the First. I thought, he had it, and then he didn't have it. Just got tracked down at the very end by Deterministic, who ran a really great race. And credit to Deterministic, a 3-year-old that we have seen now win graded stakes races on both the dirt and the turf. Of course, if you remember, won the Grade 3 Gotham and was, earned 50 Kentucky Derby prep points, and then goes to win a Grade 3, the Virginia Derby, on the turf. Obviously, his future is on the turf. Only came back with an 82 Beyer speed figure, not particularly fast. And I think there's some discussion about where the class is for this 3-year-old turf group. Certainly does not feel like there's a lot of heavy hitters going long, and you see a horse like Trickery probably being the best of that group, and that's more of a miler. So I think we have a few good milers on the turf who are 3-year-olds. That longer kind of marathon division on the turf doesn't look particularly strong as a 3-year-olds in terms of the speed figures. Now, again, a lot of these horses come back at 4, 5, they mature, they get better, they continue to improve. But credit to Deterministic for winning, and credit to Grand Mo the First. I thought ran a really good race. That's a horse that was in the Kentucky Derby, switched back to the turf as well, and won it first time out on the turf after the Derby at Gulfstream Park, and shipped all the way up to Colonial. I thought that was a bold move for Victor Barboza Jr. to do that. The trainer leaving the friendly confines of Gulfstream Park is not something a lot of Florida horses always appreciate. And so to see that horse run that well at Colonial, he's a player in that division for 3-year-olds. We'll see how he does when he has to face older company. But I thought a very good effort for both of those horses that were on the Derby trail, and in the case of Grand Mo the First, in the Kentucky Derby. Well, speaking of maybe some light speed figures, it's interesting to see the results from this past weekend as it relates to the Del Mar Futurity and the Del Mar Debutante. Because in the Del Mar Futurity, you had Gaming get the big win there, and impressive effort. And you had Tenma win the Debutante, which was another strong effort for, quote, the other Bob Baffert horse, because, of course, the favorite in that race was the other Baffert, who did not run particularly well and ended up kind of dropping out. So Tenma gets the win. Gaming gets the win. But the but is the speed figures are hardly overwhelming. Beyer gives Gaming an 82, Tenma a 74. I mean, these are really low speed figures. Now, Beyer speed figures aren't the be-all and end-all. I said this on a social media post. It's not going to tell you the whole story necessarily, but it's intriguing that none of those West Coast horses have really been running big numbers leading up to these races. And really, we've seen the big numbers coming out of Kentucky and New York and even Florida, because this weekend we saw a horse rated by merit, trained by Bo Yates, and this is a horse, a Florida bred, modest pedigree, but wow, ran a 92 in debut, winning easily, steps up, wins a Florida bred stakes race, second time out, backs up the Beyer speed figure with a 93. Does he want 2 turns? I don't know. I think he would be best doing 1 turn, sprinting. Maybe he can do a 1-turn mile down there, something like the Mucho Macho Man. But it is interesting because he has got a big speed figure, and it's a little eye-popping. We're interested to see what Yates decides to do with that horse, where they decide to go. It's the St. Elias owned horse, so you'd figure there might be some expectations. Like I said, rather modest pedigree, though. Not a very expensive horse, but man, has shown some talent down there at Gulfstream Park. Interesting to see how that's going to play out if he continues to stretch out, where he decides to go next, and if he decides to potentially, run in the Breeders' Cup or something along those lines. We'll have to wait and see. But always interesting to see how those horses continue to mature and progress. But listen, we got a big week coming up. And one of the things that's really big this week is we have the kickoff to the 2025 Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks, because we have the Grade 3 Pocahontas for the fillies and the Grade 3 Iroquois for the boys. And if you remember last year, the winner of this race was West Saratoga, who won the Iroquois. And West Saratoga, listen, he might not have ended up winning the Kentucky Derby, but he ran in the Kentucky Derby, which, quite frankly, is a little bit of an anomaly. A lot of times these Iroquois runners, very precocious 2-year-olds, they might kind of flatten out. They end up not making it to the Kentucky Derby. But credit to West Saratoga for actually making it to the Kentucky Derby last year after winning the Iroquois. And this year, it's an interesting group. You have a couple of big names. Owen Almighty for Brian Lynch. This is a horse that won the juvenile stakes at Ellis Park last time out over Politically Correct, who's also in this field. That's a horse that won the Bashford Manor very impressively, but got a phenomenal pace setup that day. And, finished second in that juvenile last time out. For Chris Davis, the trainer, Florent Giroux now comes aboard, draws the outside post, going a 1-turn mile. He's an interesting horse. I like him, but I do wonder if he wants a little bit or needs a little bit maybe of a setup in that race. Then you have a very impressive debut winner, Jonathan's Way, who broke his maiden up in Saratoga. I remember that on August 17th for trainer Phil Bauer, who had a great Saratoga meet. And this is a horse that won very impressively in debut, an Ohio bred, but sired by Vekoma, of course, one of the hot first crop sires that we've seen. And that's a horse that ran a big speed figure in debut in 85. We'll see if he can back it up. Another one who ran a big speed figure last time out is Steve Asmus's Magnitude, sired by Not This Time, out of a Bernardini mare. You always love that combination. And Tyler Gaffalione hops back aboard for this one, who broke his maiden impressively last time out at 7 furlongs. Sandman, another nice runner in this race for trainer Mark Casse. This is another one who broke its maiden up at Saratoga, sired by Tappet. You figure there's going to appreciate the distance, $1.2 million sale. So there are clearly some big expectations with this horse. And so interested to see how those horses all play out. But like I said, I'm going to have more details on this when we go to capping the card. And when you look at the field for the Pocahontas, for the ladies, you understand why. Listen, Tenma ran that 74 buyer in the Del Mar debutante. There's not a lot of big speed figures for the fillies to this point. Certainly a horse like Lacara, who is another Mark Casse horse, ran an 84 last time out, finally broke her maiden and did so impressively in a race that produced a couple of next out winners already. But, that was going 7 furlongs, but it also was the 4th try that horse had at winning. Another one that's going to obviously attract a lot of attention is Kimchi Cat. That's another one that's, I think, kind of interesting. Horse that won in debut, actually beat Lacara in the maiden race, and then goes to win the Bolton Landing in a race that was taken off turf. So I think another one that's kind of interesting in that race, you have Brett Calhoun with a horse like Stilettos, who won the Ellis Park debutante last time out, which has already produced a next out winner. Even Rudy Brissett's got a nice horse, Liam in the Dust, who won very impressively in debut, going 7 furlongs, which is never an easy thing to do. You have a horse like Strong State for Albert Stahl, who actually quite like a little bit, who finished 4th in the Spinaway last time out. So a lot of interesting runners in this race, but they don't overwhelm you necessarily. I don't think there's a monster in this group yet, but listen, sometimes it's those late developing fillies and those late developing colts that sometimes really end up taking the Derby Trail by storm. But always fun to kick things off and get stuff going for the 2025 Derby Trail as we talk through those fields for the Pocahontas for the fillies and the Iroquois for the colts. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week in NYRA Bets. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today to get all of our great content, whether you're talking about Belmont at the Big A, Churchill Downs, Woodbine, Del Mar at the Breeders' Cup, Parks for the Pennsylvania Derby, Keeneland Fall. We got it all. We got you covered. We got you covered no matter where. So I don't know what you're waiting for. Press that subscribe button today. All right, friends. Until next time, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you it's now post time.